work here at Connecting Threads, and today I am going to show you how to do English paper piecing. English paper piecing has recently become very popular. You probably see friends in your quilt circle doing it, or maybe you've seen it on social media. And English paper piecing is simply taking some fabric, taking a paper or cardboard structure, using that to stabilize your fabric, and then sewing the shapes together. It's very easy. The great thing about being alive today is that we have a tool to make everything easier. So I am going to show you how to do English paper piecing with these paper pieces. These are 1-inch hexagons from one of our favorite suppliers called Paper Pieces. So we're going to use those to put our fabric together. And then, because I like projects that I can start and finish completely on the couch, we are going to use 2.5-inch strips and scissors to cut our pieces. Let's get started. Okay, so we are just using a few simple supplies today. I've got some fabric. Now you can absolutely use scraps, you could use fabric by the yard. I just really love to use 2.5-inch pre-cut strips because they're so convenient. We've got a needle. My favorite are the black gold from Clover. They're very sharp, they're very slick. We've got some thread. Now the thing to know about thread is that the thinner your thread is, the more easily it's going to melt into your fabric. I also like to use a light gray for lighter colored fabrics or a medium gray for darker colored fabrics. Amazingly, it seems to blend in with just about any color that you're using. I've got my shapes here. So these are a little heavier than paper, maybe more like a cardstock. They're what we're going to be using to stabilize our fabric that we sew together. I've got a glue stick. We'll need a glue stick. And I've got 2 pairs of scissors. You don't need to. This is the pair of scissors we're going to be using to cut our fabric, so you don't even need a rotary blade. And then I like to keep a little pair of snips with me when I'm working. I also have a bobbin. Something I like to do is wind the thread that I'm going to be using onto a bobbin, and then I can just keep it in my hand sewing kit. It's there for me rather than carrying around a big spool or cone of thread. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm gonna take a shape. I'm gonna take fabric. And the nice thing about English paper piecing is that an exact 1/4-inch seam allowance isn't nearly as important as it is with traditional piecing. So that's going to allow me to just take my scissors and cut around my shape. Now when I am cutting fabric for a project, I'll actually do 5 or 6 layers of fabric at a time. And because these edges are going to be folded over and glued down to our paper piece, we don't really have to worry about even those edges being perfect because we're going to be sewing along this folded over edge. Okay, so I'm going to cut a few more pieces and then we're going to get started. So now we have a couple of pieces of cut out fabric and a couple of paper pieces. We're gonna grab our glue stick. Now there are other ways of basting your fabric together. I like glue stick. It is the fastest and most natural for me. Some people prefer to actually sew it together. It's totally up to you. We're gonna take our glue pen and we're gonna do a thin line very close to each edge of our paper piece. I really like glues that have temporary color to them, like this one. So it looks blue, but it's gonna dry clear. That way I know where I'm putting it. So I've got the right side of my fabric facing down. I've got the glue side of my paper piece facing up. And I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna fold those over and press down onto the glue. Now there's no right way or wrong way. I like to kind of move around this way. They seem to stay down a little bit better. But if you need to go in and add some more glue, that's okay. And don't worry too much about getting glue on your fabric. So remember how I told you it's not a big deal if you don't have a perfect 1/4 inch seam allowance? As you can see here, my seam allowance is a little skinnier right here, a little fatter up here. It's no big deal because we're gonna be sewing along the edge. All right, let's go ahead and glue a few more pieces and then we'll start sewing them together. Okay, now that we have some shapes made out of our fabric, we're gonna sew them together. In English paper piecing, there aren't a whole lot of stages where you need to be exacting. I would say the most important place to really make sure everything lines up is this part, so that when we're sewing together, our corners line up with our corners. If we get off just a little bit, it's gonna get harder when it's time to go in and add another piece. Let's just make sure when we start to sew that our edges are lined up really well. Okay, I've got my needle and my thread, and now we're gonna start sewing. Now, here's something to watch for. You will know if you stick your thread through paper because you will feel some resistance. We wanna make sure to only stick your needle and thread through fabric, otherwise it can be hard to remove your paper foundation. But we want to get as close as we can to the edge of that fabric. I like to really try and just have a couple of threads at the edge of my fabric as I go through. I'm just gonna go ahead and cut that off, otherwise it's gonna drive me nuts. There we go. So a couple of things I would recommend. Definitely have a nice bright light handy, so it can be hard to get your needle to go right where you want it if we don't have nice bright light. There is also no shame in using a magnifier. In fact, they make lights now that go around your neck that also have a magnifying element. When you get to the edge, put your last stitch right in that corner, and then I like to pull my needle right through there. Now we have 2 hexagons sewn together. So there you have it. It's as simple as that. Now, we've used hexagons. There are all kinds of shapes you can use and all kinds of combinations. We'll go ahead and list some of our favorite resources in the comments if you're looking for books and patterns to inspire you. Here's one example of a very popular English paper piecing motif. This is known as a hexagon flower. We would love to see what you decide to make when you try out English paper piecing. Thank you so much for following along. We hope you had fun, learned something new. As always, we love to see what you're making. So if you decide to try out English paper piecing, tag us on social media with Together We Quilt. See you next time.